So Jerusalem is the holiest of sites. It's the omphalos, or the navel of the world, because it's where, in the Christian conception, it's where Jesus and the disciples worked, right? Where they walked, where they ministered. So the end of the book of the Revelation shows the vision of the heavenly Jerusalem. And this is supposed to be the focal point for this new world in a lot of ways, this new society where all the suffering and all the death and all the tears of the old order are wiped away. So Jerusalem plays an important role, both physically, but also symbolically.
Jerusalem is ground zero for the apocalypse. All of the end-time prophecies center on this very city. And it looks like everything is getting ready to go into play for the fall of 2017, which is the Jubilee year, according to the ancient calendar.
A Jubilee year occurs every 50 years within a certain time frame on the biblical calendar. 7 years, 7 times to get to what is known as the year of Jubilee. And the year of Jubilee, biblically, is when all debts were canceled and all the land returned back to the original owner. Many people believe that God will return in a year of Jubilee because in Leviticus 25, God says all the earth is mine, the land will not be sold forever. And so many believe that it will be some year in a Jubilee cycle that God will return and reclaim the earth.
I live in a Jewish community in the Galilee, and I was given a manuscript concerning the prophecy of a 13th century Jewish sage, a rabbi, Judah the Righteous. He said that for 400 years, 8 Jubilees, the Ottoman Turks would rule Jerusalem. Then it would be no man's land for 1 Jubilee. And then the next Jubilee, it would be in the hands of the Jewish nation. And then the next Jubilee would be the beginning of the end-time Messianic age. In 1217, Judah the Righteous spoke these words. 300 years, 6 Jubilee periods later, in 1517, the Ottoman Turks took Jerusalem. They held it for 400 years, exactly 8 Jubilees to 1917. That is when General Allenby took Jerusalem. It immediately, under the guidance and the directive of the League of Nations, the predecessor to the United Nations, was labeled no man's land. Exactly the words of Judah the Righteous hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. And for 1 Jubilee was no man's land, and then the Jewish nation, which had not been for nearly 2,000 years, took Jerusalem and has now held it in 2017. According to Judah the Righteous, begins the end-time Messianic age.
This is the 50th year or Jubilee anniversary for Jerusalem. But also, we have the 70th anniversary of Israel becoming a nation. These are right on top of each other. Could something happen prophetically this year?
When we come to the end of September, that is when we are expecting the full-scale invasion in the war against Israel. According to the prophets, and the prophet Zechariah specifically, he told us exactly what he saw by revelation. He saw cylindrical shaped objects, flying objects that have an evil fire offering encased in lead sent from the land of Shinar, which is modern day Iran, Iraq, Syria, against the land of Israel. And these flying containers that he saw 2,400 years ago are the exact dimensions of a modern day Scud missile. And this thing is all ramping up for this full-scale war. Yeshua told John to write down the things that he's just seen, the things which are now, and the things that will come to pass in the future. He sees Yeshua rip off 7 seals from the scroll, and the events that play out on the earth are cataclysmic. We see death happen. We see a great sword. We see biological warfare, famine and pestilence, disease. We see the sky roll back and clouds roll up that darken out the sun, moon, and stars. Very clearly what we would think of as thermonuclear war.
You read about cities being destroyed, in a blink of an eye, in an instant, in an hour, destruction comes. You read about the fire. You read about men's skin melting off their bones and things like that. I mean, for somebody who had no concept of explosives and fire like we make fire now in the modern times, I think if you just look at it with a clear mind and say, what was John really talking about when he tried to describe these visions that he had? It's obviously, to me, it's obviously nuclear war. If we're focused on Israel in the spotlight, yeah, there's going to be nuclear war there.
People who study the Middle East, they say the whole thing's like a big powder keg. There's fuses all over the place. We're just waiting for one of them to get lit. Since Israel became a nation, they have fought many wars, and they're always on guard against another war. And if you track any of that news, it looks like it could happen any moment. It's that volatile.
Iran has said openly, the leader, that when they get a nuke, they are going to nuke Israel. The one nation that the prophets say is going to nuke Israel in the last days. Qatar has one nuclear warhead that we know of. They have one, but they are in the hands of the radicals that want to nuke Israel. We could see this thing turn around very quickly, and as we see in the book of the Revelation, that this great sword is given, a great sword, and this great sword is going to take peace from the earth and is going to cause people to kill each other. This is the most exciting time that has ever been in the history of mankind. And when these wars start happening and the nukes start flying, it's like, okay, hold on, this is going to be one wild ride, and I want to be here in this city when this whole thing comes down. I want to be. There's nothing wrong with us looking at these things and saying, here are these patterns. This looks like this pattern is now all stacking up. 1917, General Allenby takes Jerusalem. 1967, 50 years later, one Jubilee. The nation of Israel, which didn't exist in 1917, took Jerusalem. 2017 being the next Jubilee. Well, that Jubilee also happens to be 70 years from when Israel became a nation in one day, fulfilling the 2,600-year-old prophecy of Isaiah. When we see all these patterns in place, we have to say that this may be the hand of the Almighty. It could be coincidence, but I think we'd be foolish to just brush it all aside as just coincidence. We need to open our eyes and see if the Almighty is not telling us something.
What's a sign? They take many forms, but certainly signs in the sky have always been signs from the Father. And there are some amazing things going on in the sky.
It's not surprising that people would pay attention to the sky. It is, in fact, half of the environment. One of the things that people notice, besides the incredible grandeur and beauty of something like the night sky, or the majesty and the predictability of the phases of the moon and the sunrises and the sunsets, is the fact that the sky is a convenient source of... They saw the stars come and go in different seasons, and those were all keys to survival, because those seasonal changes signaled the need or change for food, shelter, clothing, resources. And so just about everybody depended on the sky one way or another.
The tradition of using the stars and the constellations and so forth in the ancient Hebrew culture started in Genesis chapter 1, and it says that God himself placed stars and signs in the heavens and the atmosphere. The Jewish people later formed their calendar on astronomical observations and the sighting of the new moon every month from Jerusalem. But, very interestingly, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Old Testament, calls a series of feasts in the book of Leviticus a moed, M-O-E-D, and these are appointed times that God deals with people on the earth, or the Jewish people himself.